What happens when arrogance meets altitude? Aboard a $75 million private jet, one passenger, dripping in designer labels, makes a fatal mistake. She looks at a black man serving her champagne and snaps her fingers, calling him just the help. She spends the entire flight humiliating him, unaware that the man she's ordering to polish silverware doesn't just work on the jet. He owns it. Stick around to hear the story of how one woman's vicious assumption led to the most expensive and humiliating karma of her life. The air at Teterboro Airport doesn't just smell like jet fuel, it smells like money. It's a crisp November morning, and the tarmac is a parking lot for the global elite. A Dassault Falcon 8X here, a Bombardier Global 7500 there. But the queen of the fleet, parked gleaming and predatory at the private signature aviation hangar, was N440T Tiddy. It was a brand new Gulfstream G800, the paint so fresh it seemed wet. This was its maiden cross-country voyage from New Jersey to San Jose. Inside, Marcus Thorne was running a hand over a bulkhead panel, feeling for the slightest vibration. He was dressed not in the bespoke Tom Ford suits he was known for on the covers of Forbes and Wired, but in a simple, perfectly tailored black polo shirt and black trousers. The only identifier was a small, subtle logo over his heart, the stylized delta of Thorne Dynamics, his $80 billion AI and aerospace conglomerate. At 38, Marcus was a man who didn't just build an empire, he understood every bolt within it. He was a former engineer, and he trusted his hands more than he trusted reports. This was his jet, the new flagship of his fleet, and he was doing a final, personal inspection. "Mr. Thorne, they're here," said a young woman, her voice hushed. This was Chloe, the new lead flight attendant, barely 24 and visibly nervous. "Thank you, Chloe," Marcus said, his voice a calm baritone. "Remember the protocol. You're the lead. I'm just observing today. My name is Mark. I'm with the in-flight services team, doing a final review." Chloe nodded, swallowing. "Right. Mark. Got it." Marcus smiled faintly. He wasn't trying to deceive anyone. He was simply trying to observe the natural flow of his new crew and cabin. He found that when people knew the CEO was watching, they performed for him. He wanted to see how they performed for the client. The heavy cabin door hissed open, and the passengers for the 5-hour flight began to board. First came Richard Sterling, CEO of Sterling Capital, a man in his late 50s with a pink, perpetually anxious face and a suit that cost more than Chloe's car. He was followed by 2 junior analysts, both looking wide-eyed at the G800's interior. The cream-white leather, the polished Macassar ebony wood veneers, the brushed platinum fittings. "Incredible, just incredible," Richard beamed, pumping Marcus's hand vigorously. "Mark, is it? Fantastic service. Just fantastic. We are so thrilled Mr. Thorne is letting us charter this." Marcus noted the assumption. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Sterling. Can I get you a drink before takeoff?" "Oh, marvelous. Champagne, if you have it." "Of course." Then she boarded. Her name was Caroline Croft. She was Richard's senior VP of acquisitions, a woman who wielded her resume like a weapon. She wore a severe white pantsuit, and her blonde hair was pulled back into a ponytail so tight it seemed to be stretching her face. She was talking loudly into a pearl-white iPhone. "No, I told him. The valuation is trash. If he doesn't accept $400 million, let him rot. I'm getting on the jet now. I'll deal with it when I land." She clicked off the phone and surveyed the cabin with a look of profound boredom, as if the $75 million aircraft was a minor inconvenience. Her eyes swept past Chloe and landed on Marcus. She didn't speak to him. She simply held out her coat, a heavy camel hair Max Mara, and her oversized, offensively expensive Hermes Birkin bag. She didn't even look at his face, just at his chest. Marcus paused for a beat. "Welcome aboard, Mum. I can hang your coat for you." Caroline finally looked at him, her eyes narrowing. "And the bag," she said, her voice a nasal drawl. "Put it somewhere I can see it. And don't you dare try to put it in an overhead. The leather can't be compressed." "Mum, for taxi and takeoff, FAA regulations require all carry-on items to be—" Caroline cut him off with a sharp, impatient wave of her hand. "I don't care about your regulations. This bag is worth more than your salary. Handle it." Richard Sterling cleared his throat, his face flushing. "Caroline, please, I'm sure Mark knows the rules." "I'm sure Mark knows his job," Caroline snapped, turning her glare on her boss. "His job is to facilitate. I am a passenger. He is the help. Facilitate." The cabin fell into a thick, dead silence. The two junior analysts suddenly became fascinated by their shoes. Chloe looked like she had seen a ghost. Marcus Thorne, the man who had personally coded the guidance system for the Ares 5 rocket, and who currently held the digital keys to the country's largest secure data network, met her gaze. His expression was one of perfect, placid calm. "Of course, ma'am," he said, his voice smooth as silk. "I will find the perfect place for it." He took the bag from her. She released it with a look of distaste, as if his hands were dirty, and walked it to a private, climate-controlled forward closet, a custom feature he had personally designed. He placed it gently on a padded shelf and secured it with a soft-touch strap. When he returned, Caroline was already seated in the largest captain's chair, kicking off her Louboutin heels and putting her bare feet up on the ebony bulkhead. "Ahem," she said loudly to Chloe. "Is anyone going to get me a drink, or do you all just stand around?" Marcus nodded to Chloe, who jumped. "Right away, Miss Croft. Champagne?" "No," Caroline sneered. "I saw what you're pouring, Sterling. It's probably some basic verve. Get me a vodka martini, Grey Goose, very dry, 3 olives, shaken, not stirred. And if the olives aren't blue cheese stuffed, send them back. Ma'am, we may not have that specific garnish," Chloe stammered. "Then what good are you?" Caroline said, opening a magazine. Marcus stepped in smoothly. "I'll handle it, Chloe. Ma'am, I will personally check our galley. I am almost certain I can accommodate you." Caroline didn't even look up. "See that you do. It's so hard to find good help these days." The G800 climbed with a power that was almost silent, slicing through the thin clouds and leveling off at 41,000 feet. Below, the curvature of the earth was just visible, a thin blue line against the black. Marcus was in the galley, a small but impeccably designed space. He was, in fact, stuffing gorgonzola into green olives. He'd insisted the jet be stocked for any contingency. He found the repetitive motion calming. It gave him time to think. Chloe was leaning against the counter, wringing her hands. "Mr. Thorne." "Mark, I am so sorry. That woman is a monster. I should have—" "You're doing fine, Chloe," Marcus said, not looking up. "The first rule of high-end service is de-escalation. The customer isn't always right, but they are always the customer. Your job is to maintain the peace. My job is to decide if they're a customer we want." "But she's Richard Sterling's VP. He's pitching the Thorne Dynamics IPO. It's a huge deal, isn't it?" "It's a deal," Marcus said, placing the 3 olives on a silver pick. Whether it's huge remains to be seen. He built the martini with the precision of a chemist. He chilled the glass with shaved ice, measured the vodka and vermouth to the milliliter, and gave it a sharp, professional shake. He poured the crystal-clear liquid into the glass, the 3 olives settling perfectly. He carried the tray into the cabin. Caroline was on her laptop, her fingers clattering. Richard Sterling and his analysts were huddled in the 4-seat club section, whispering over documents. Marcus placed the martini on a polished coaster beside her. "Your vodka martini, Miss Croft. Grey goose, very dry, 3 blue cheese stuffed olives, shaken." She picked it up, sniffed it, and took a small, critical sip. Her face soured. "It's tepid," she announced. Marcus kept his hands clasped behind his back. "I assure you, ma'am, the vodka was frozen, and the shaker was filled with ice." "Are you calling me a liar?" she asked, her voice dangerously quiet. This help," she said, turning to Richard Sterling, "is arguing with me." "Caroline, I'm sure it's fine," Richard said, his voice pleading. "No, Richard, it is not fine. We are here to impress Mr. Thorne, and your choice of charter is providing C-list service. This is unacceptable." She shoved the glass back at Marcus, sloshing some of the $15 drink onto his hand. "Do it again. And this time, actually make it cold." Marcus looked at the clear liquid dripping from his hand. He slowly pulled a linen napkin from his pocket and wiped his skin. "As you wish, ma'am." He turned, walked back to the galley, dumped the entire contents of the glass, and began the process again. This time, he shook the cocktail shaker for 30 straight seconds, the sound a sharp, rhythmic shk-shk-shk that cut through the cabin's quiet. The metal became so cold it frosted over in his hand. He returned and placed the new drink down. He didn't speak. Caroline took a sip. "Better," she conceded, as if granting him a great favor. An hour passed. The fasten seatbelt sign pinged on as the jet hit a patch of minor turbulence over the Rockies. Caroline let out an audible, theatrical sigh. "Oh, for God's sake. Richard, can't these people even fly the plane properly? It's like a roller coaster." Chloe, walking by to collect glasses, quickly grabbed a stanchion to steady herself. "Just some mild mountain wave turbulence, ma'am," Chloe said politely. "It's very common. I don't care if it's common. It's unprofessional. Tell the pilot to fly around it. That's what we pay for." "Ma'am, that's not really possible," Chloe said, her face pale. "Don't tell me what's not possible," Caroline snapped. "This isn't some Southwest cattle car. Your job is to make it possible. Go, tell the pilot, now." Chloe looked to Marcus, her eyes wide with panic. Marcus stepped forward. "Ms. Croft, our flight crew is one of the best in the world. Captain Rostovar is flying at an altitude and route prescribed by the FAA for maximum safety and comfort. She is already doing everything possible." Caroline's head swiveled toward him, her eyes narrowing to slits. She seemed incensed that he had spoken without being spoken to. "Who?" she said, her voice dripping with ice. "Are you the co-pilot, the mechanic, or are you just the help?" "My name is Mark, ma'am. I'm on the in-flight services team." "So the help," she concluded. "I don't recall asking for your opinion on aerodynamics. Your job is to do as you're told, and I am telling you to go to the cockpit and tell the pilot to fix this. Or do I have to file a formal complaint? I will, you know. I will have your job." Marcus held her gaze. The plane was perfectly stable, the turbulence already past. The seatbelt sign pinged off. "There's no need, ma'am," Marcus said, his voice flat. "The air is smooth again. Can I offer you a warm towel?" Caroline scoffed. "Pathetic. Just pathetic." She turned back to her laptop, dismissing him. But the incident had solidified her target. For the rest of the flight, she treated him not as a person, but as a piece of furniture that could move. She snapped her fingers to get his attention. She put her empty glass on the floor next to her, instead of on the table, forcing him to bend over to retrieve it. She demanded Chloe go do something else, and insisted Mark be the only one to serve her, as if punishing him with the labor. "You," she'd say, holding up a file. "I'm done with this. Throw it away." It was a printed report, There was no away to throw it. You. My feet are cold. Where are the blankets? No, not that one. That one looks cheap. Find me a cashmere one. Marcus accommodated every request with a chilling, unwavering politeness. He brought her the cashmere blanket. He took the report and placed it in a recycling bin. He refilled her drink and her colleagues' drinks, and never once let his composure crack. He was, in every visual sense, the perfect, invisible steward. And that, to Caroline Croft, made him nothing at all. With 2 hours left in the flight, Richard Sterling decided it was time. The real purpose of this trip wasn't just to fly. It was to rehearse his big pitch. He was trying to land the Thorne Dynamics IPO, a deal that would make his firm hundreds of millions in fees and catapult Sterling Capital into the Wall Street stratosphere. "All right, team," Richard said, rubbing his hands together. "Let's run the deck. I want this flawless for when we meet Mr. Thorne's people tomorrow." He and his analysts gathered around the cabin's 4K monitor. Caroline, however, remained in her seat, sipping a fresh martini, her fourth. "Caroline, aren't you going to join us?" Richard asked nervously. "Your M&A projections are slide 42. Caroline waved a dismissive hand. "Richard, please. I wrote the slides. I don't need to see them. I'll listen from here. You need the practice more than I do." Richard flushed crimson, but nodded. Right. Okay. Good morning. Sterling Capital is honored to present our strategy for the future of Thorne Dynamics. He began his pitch. It was a standard, data-heavy presentation, full of buzzwords like synergy, vertical integration, and leveraging assets. Marcus stood at the back of the cabin, ostensibly polishing glasses, but he was listening to every word. This was, after all, his company Sterling was dissecting. And our valuation model places Thorne Dynamics at a $95 billion pre-money valuation, which we feel is aggressive but achievable, Richard said, puffing his chest. Caroline let out a loud, unladylike snort. Richard stopped. Something wrong, Caroline?" She rolled her eyes and took a long sip of her drink. "Richard, you're giving it away. 95? Are you insane? You always low ball. You start at 70, max. You let them fight to get to 80. You make them feel like they've won. God, it's amateur hour," Richard stammered. "But Caroline, the pre-launch data, the DoD contracts, the 95 is solid." "The data," she said, mocking the word, "is irrelevant. This isn't about data. It's about optics. We're talking about Marcus Thorne. The man's a ghost. He's new money, Richard. He came from nothing. Some coding scholarship in Michigan, wasn't it?" Marcus, polishing a highball glass, didn't break rhythm. His hand was rock steady. Caroline continued, her voice rising in condescending authority. "These tech guys, they're brilliant at one thing and utterly clueless about everything else. They have no class, no lineage. They don't understand the game. The game is about us." She gestured to herself. "Old money, showing them the way. We are Sterling Capital. We've been on the street for 70 years. He needs our legitimacy. Without us, he's just another geek with a good idea. We are the ones who anoint him." One of the junior analysts, a young man named David, spoke up. "But Ms. Croft, I read that Thorne is notoriously selective. He fired Goldman Sachs last year. He doesn't seem to care about the game. He seems to care about, I don't know, integrity." Caroline shot him a look that could curdle milk. "David, shut up. You're a child. Integrity is a word poor people use. On Wall Street, we call it leverage. And we have it. He needs us. He just doesn't know it yet." She set her empty glass down and snapped her fingers in Marcus's direction, not even bothering to look. "You. Mark. Another one? And be quick about it." Marcus quietly took the glass. Caroline leaned back, putting her feet up on the opposing seat. "You see, Richard, it's all about demonstrating power. You have to establish dominance from the second you walk in. You let them know who is in charge. You let them know who is the master and who is the help." She glanced directly at Marcus's back as he walked to the galley. "Everyone has a place," she said, her voice smug. "A proper station in life. The pilots fly. The analysts crunch numbers. We," she said to Richard, "close the deals. And he," she hooked a thumb toward Marcus, "pours the drinks." She looked at Marcus as he returned. He was carrying the fresh martini on a small silver tray. "Isn't that right, Mark?" she asked, a cruel smile playing on her lips. "You understand. People should know their place. Wouldn't you agree?" Marcus stopped. He stood in the aisle, the martini in his hand. The cabin was silent, save for the faint hum of the Rolls-Royce engines. He looked at her, his dark eyes unreadable. It was the first time he had truly looked at her, and the intensity of his gaze made her smile falter, just for a second. "I believe," Marcus said, his voice quiet but carrying an extraordinary weight, "that everyone creates their own place, Miss Croft, and some people are not very careful about the place they create for themselves." He placed the drink on her table. Caroline stared at him, momentarily thrown by the philosophy. Then she laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "How very pull yourself up by your bootstraps. It's adorable. You should write a self-help book. Now go away. The adults are talking." Marcus gave a short, sharp nod and returned to the galley. Richard Sterling, meanwhile, was starting to look physically ill. Something in Mark's eyes, something in his perfectly measured response, had triggered a horrible, sinking feeling in his stomach. He'd seen pictures of Marcus Thorne, but always in a power suit, on a stage, or at a gala. Never in a simple black polo. He covertly pulled out his phone and typed Marcus Thorne into Google Images. He scrolled. Suit, tuxedo, wired cover, and then one. A candid shot. Marcus at a Thorne Dynamics engineering site, talking to a technician. He was wearing a black company polo, black trousers, and an intense, focused expression. Richard's blood ran cold. He looked from the photo on his phone to the man in the galley, back to the photo, and back to the man. It was him. It was Marcus Thorne. Richard Sterling's $5,000 suit was suddenly drenched in a cold sweat. His mouth went dry. All the air had been sucked from the cabin. "Oh my God," he whispered, his hand trembling. "What is it, Richard?" Caroline asked, annoyed. "Did you break a nail?" "Caroline," Richard choked out, his voice a strangled gasp. "Stop talking, now." Caroline was about to unleash a biting retort when the cabin's intercom chimed. It wasn't the pilot's voice, it was Chloe's. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are now on our final approach to San Jose Mineta International Airport." But then, a second, different chime sounded. A softer, internal cabin chime. Marcus Thorne emerged from the galley, wiping his hands on a linen towel. He looked perfectly composed, as if he'd just finished a pleasant afternoon task. He walked not to the galley to secure it for landing, but to the very front of the cabin. He stood under the soft glow of the bulkhead light, next to the 4K monitor, where Richard's disastrous presentation was still frozen. He looked at his passengers, at the two terrified analysts, at Richard Sterling, who looked like he was about to have a coronary, and finally at Caroline Croft, who was staring at him with a mixture of confusion and pure, unadulterated contempt. "What do you think you're doing?" she hissed. Get back to the galley and buckle up." Marcus ignored her. He pressed a button on the wall panel. The 4K monitor flickered from Richard's pitch to a live, forward-facing camera feed from the jet's nose. The runway lights of San Jose were dead ahead, but the jet wasn't aiming for the main terminal. It was banking smoothly toward a massive, private complex on the north side of the field. A stunning, all-glass hangar complex emblazoned with the familiar Delta logo of Thorn Dynamics. "As Chloe mentioned," Marcus said, his voice completely changed. It was no longer the voice of Mark, the deferential steward. It was the voice from the TED Talks, the voice that commanded boardrooms and silenced auditoriums. It was crisp, powerful, and resonated with absolute authority. "We are on final approach to San Jose. We will be landing at the Thorn Dynamics Aerospace hangar in approximately 3 minutes. I'd ask you to please fasten your seatbelts." The blood drained from Caroline's face. Her foundation, caked on too heavily, suddenly looked like a ghoulish mask. Her eyes darted from Marcus to the logo on the hangar, back to Marcus. What did you say?" she whispered. The jet touched down with a buttery smoothness. The pilots, Captain Eva Rostova and her first officer, were masters of their craft, as Marcus knew they were. The plane decelerated and made a sharp turn, taxiing directly toward the illuminated hangar, where a line of black, waiting Escalades was parked on the tarmac. The jet rolled to a perfect stop. The engines spooled down. The silence that filled the cabin was deafening. Marcus unclipped a small tablet from a discreet mount on the wall, the tablet he'd been texting on earlier. He tapped the screen. "Richard," Marcus said, his voice dangerously calm. Richard Sterling flinched as if struck. Mr. Thorn, I can explain. I had no idea." "That," Marcus said, "is precisely the problem, Richard. You had no idea. You walked onto my aircraft, as my guest, to pitch my company, and you had no idea who I was, because I was wearing a polo shirt and handing you a drink." He turned his gaze to Caroline. She was frozen. She looked like a statue of arrogance, her mouth half open, her martini glass still clutched in her hand. "Mr. Thorn," Marcus continued, "your firm's analysis was illuminating, but your VP, Ms. Croft, was even more so." He began to walk down the aisle, his footsteps silent on the plush carpet. He stopped right next to her chair. "You had quite a few insights, Ms. Croft, that I'm new money, that I have no class, that I don't understand the game, that I need you to anoint me." Every word was a nail in her coffin. She was shrinking in her seat, trying to press herself away from him. You heard that?" she stammered. "I have excellent hearing," Marcus said. "I also have an excellent memory. People should know their place. I believe that was another of your gems. He's just the help." He leaned in, not threateningly, but with the intimacy of a surgeon about to make the final cut. "Let me be perfectly clear, Ms. Croft. This," he swept his hand around the cabin, "is my place. A place I built. Not one I inherited. A place where we value engineering, integrity, and respect. A place where the person serving the coffee is treated with the same dignity as the person flying the plane, because they are both essential. You are not." "Richard!" Caroline shrieked, finally finding her voice. "Richard, do something! Tell him!" Richard Sterling looked at her, his face a mask of pale, sweaty terror. "Shut up, Caroline," he whispered. "Just shut up." "The deal," Marcus said, addressing Richard, but never taking his eyes off Caroline, "is off. The Thorn Dynamics IPO will not be handled by Sterling Capital. I would not trust my company to a man who cannot manage his own team. I would not partner with a firm that employs people who believe their value is based on lineage rather than merit. He straightened up. And I certainly won't be anointed by you. The main cabin door hissed open, flooding the cabin with the cool California twilight. Standing at the bottom of the air stairs was not a gaggle of drivers, but a single imposing man in a dark suit, Marcus's head of security, a former Secret Service agent named Frank. Marcus looked at Frank and nodded. Frank nodded back and stepped onto the jet. "Mr. Thorne," Richard Sterling began, standing up, his hands shaking so badly he could barely hold his briefcase. "Please, a mistake. A terrible, terrible mistake. She's abrasive. She's fired. Right now. Caroline, you're fired. See? It's done. Please, Marcus. The IPO. This will ruin me." Marcus looked at him with a coldness that was absolute. "You're wrong, Richard. This won't ruin you. Your character ruined you. You heard her for 5 hours. You heard the casual cruelty. You heard the racism. You heard the classism. And you said nothing. You were worried about rocking the boat. You were worried about your fee. You didn't just fail a character test, Richard. You failed a leadership test." Marcus turned to Frank, his head of security. "Frank, please escort Ms. Croft off my property." "Wait," Caroline yelped, scrambling to gather her things. "My bag! My Birkin! You have my bag!" Marcus walked to the forward closet. He retrieved the $30,000 bag and walked back. He held it out to her, handle first. "Here is your bag, ma'am," he said, his voice flat. She snatched it from him. "Now, Frank," Marcus said. Frank, a man who looked like he could bench press the jet, gently but firmly took Caroline by the elbow. "No!" she shrieked, trying to pull away. "You can't do this. I'm a guest. I'll sue you. I'll sue everyone." "You are trespassing, Miss Croft," Marcus said. "The Escalades," he gestured to the waiting line of cars, "are for the other investors, the ones who know how to behave. Your ride is elsewhere." "Where am I supposed to go? How do I get to the hotel?" she cried, her voice cracking with the first real tears of panic. "Frank," Marcus said, "please be so kind as to escort Ms. Croft to the rideshare pickup area." Frank nodded. "Which one, sir?" "The one outside the main security gate, by the freeway." Caroline's face went slack with horror. The main gate was over a mile away, on the other side of the airfield. "No, no, please!" she begged, her entire facade crumbling in an instant. The power was gone. The lineage was gone. She was just a cruel woman, stranded and terrified. "Please, Mr. Thorne, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean it. I was... "You were just what, Caroline?" Marcus asked, his voice soft. "Being yourself." "That's what I thought." He turned his back on her. "Frank. Now." Frank didn't hesitate. He guided the sobbing, struggling Caroline down the airstairs. The 2 junior analysts, David and the other, scurried past them, not daring to make eye contact, and got into the last Escalade. Richard Sterling was the last one left. He stood in the cabin, a broken man. "Marcus, what do I do?" he whispered. Marcus looked at him, not with anger, but with something worse. Pity. "You can take the first car, Richard. Go to your hotel. Call your board, and figure out how to explain to them that you lost the single biggest deal in your firm's history, because you were too cowardly to tell your VP to be a decent human being." Richard stumbled down the stairs. Marcus stood alone in the cabin of his new jet. He looked over at the half-finished martini, the one he'd made with his own hands. He picked it up, swirled the liquid, and poured it down the galley sink. Chloe emerged from the crew rest area, her eyes wide. "Sir, that," Marcus said, "was a necessary correction, Chloe. Let's get the post-flight checks done." He was all business again, as if the last 5 hours had been nothing more than a minor system diagnostic. But as he looked out the window, he watched Frank leading Caroline Croft, a tiny, struggling figure dragging her priceless handbag through the gravel, toward the distant, flickering lights of the main gate. The karma that hit Caroline Croft didn't land like a feather. It landed like an anvil. She was, as promised, escorted to the public rideshare loop outside the T-hangars. It was a cold, wind-swept patch of concrete next to a chain-link fence, smelling of exhaust. She sat on her Birkin bag, her white suit now smudged with grime, and wept tears of pure, unadulterated rage. Her phone was at 4%. She managed to call an Uber just as it died. When she finally got to the Rosewood Sand Hill Hotel an hour later, Richard Sterling was waiting in the lobby. He wasn't there to console her. "Pack your bags," he said, his voice dead. He didn't even look at her. "There's a security guard upstairs waiting to watch you. You're on a 10 p.m. red-eye back to Newark. Coach, your corporate cards are cancelled. We're done, Caroline. You're done." "Richard, you can't." "I can," he snarled, his face purple. "You didn't just cost me a deal, you cost me my company." But the real bomb had yet to drop. It turned out that David, the junior analyst, the one who had tried to defend Marcus Thorne's integrity, had been recording the audio of the pitch rehearsal on his phone. He wanted to study it later, to learn from it. He had accidentally forgotten to stop the recording. He had captured everything. It's so hard to find good help these days. This isn't some Southwest cattle car. He's new money. They have no class. They need us to anoint them. People should know their place, wouldn't you agree? And finally, the entire devastating confrontation. David, sensing the end of Sterling Capital, did what any ambitious young analyst would do. He saved himself. He sent the audio file to a reporter at Bloomberg with the subject line, "The most expensive flight of all time." By the time Caroline's coach-class flight was somewhere over Nebraska, the story had broken. It was a nuclear explosion. Bloomberg. People should know their place. Sterling VP's in-flight rant kills Thorne Dynamics IPO. The audio clips were embedded in the article. The entire tech and financial world heard Caroline's sneering, classist, racist-coded takedown. They heard her dismiss one of the most respected, self-made men in the world as just the help. And they heard Marcus Thorne's cold, surgical dismantling of her in response. The fallout was instantaneous. By morning, Sterling Capital's phones were ringing off the hook, but they weren't calls from new clients. They were from existing ones. 3 different Silicon Valley tech firms, all run by new money founders, pulled their portfolios before the market even opened. Total value, $14 billion. A major pension fund, citing a violation of ethical partnership standards based on the audio, announced it was severing ties. When the NYSE opened, Sterling Capital's stock, ticker StarSap, free fell. It dropped 30% in the first hour. Richard Sterling was finished. The board convened an emergency meeting and demanded his resignation. The company his grandfather had founded was now toxic, a pariah on Wall Street. Caroline Croft, of course, was already gone, but her fate was sealed. The Bloomberg article had named her. Her photo was everywhere. She wasn't just fired. She was radioactive, blacklisted. She became the face of Wall Street arrogance. She was a meme, a punchline on late-night TV. Feeling like you know your place, or are you having a Caroline Croft day? Her fiancé, a hedge fund manager, dumped her via text message. Her co-op board in her Tony Upper East Side building started proceedings to have her removed, citing the notoriety clause in her contract. She had to sell her apartment at a loss just to pay her legal bills. She had built her entire identity on a foundation of money, status, and power. And in 5 hours, Marcus Thorne had taken it all away, not by being cruel, but simply by letting her be herself in front of a live microphone. The karma that hit Caroline Croft and Richard Sterling was not a single, swift event. It was a slow, systemic, and perfect collapse, a cosmic balancing of a ledger that had been in the red for far too long. For Richard Sterling, the end began before the G800's wheels had even cooled on the tarmac. By the time he'd been driven to the Rosewood Sand Hill in that silent, terrifying Escalade, his phone was already buzzing with a high-priority alert from his New York office. The Bloomberg article had dropped. David, the junior analyst, the one who had tried to defend Marcus Thorne's integrity, had done exactly what any ambitious, terrified young man would do when he realized his boss had just flown the entire company into the side of a mountain. He had saved himself. The audio file, titled Sterling Pitch Rehearsal, nearly more for 40D MP3, had been emailed to a top reporter at Bloomberg before the jet had even landed. The article was a masterpiece of journalistic evisceration. The headline was devastating. "We anoint him. Audio leak reveals Sterling Capital VP's in-flight rant. Thorne Dynamics IPO reportedly pulled." The story was brutal. It included embedded, playable clips. The world could now hear, in high fidelity, Caroline's sneering voice. "He's new money. They have no class. This isn't some Southwest cattle car. His job is to facilitate. I am a passenger. He is the help." People should know their place, wouldn't you agree? It was a global public execution. Richard Sterling sat in his 2000 a night hotel suite, the Bloomberg page open on his laptop, and listened to the sound of his 70-year-old family legacy turning to ash. The NYSE opening bell was still 5 hours away, but the pre-market trading was a bloodbath. Sterling Capital's stock, ticker STRACAP, was in absolute freefall. His old money clients, the pension funds, the university endowments, the family trusts, were not just offended by the language, they were terrified by the stupidity. Sterling Capital had proven itself to be a firm of spectacular, catastrophic incompetence. An emergency board meeting was called for 7 a.m. Richard wasn't even allowed to attend in person. He was ordered to join via Zoom, a humiliating concession. When his face appeared on the giant screen in the New York boardroom, he wasn't greeted by colleagues. He was met by a firing squad of stony-faced old men, the very lineage Caroline had been so proud of. "You let this happen, Richard," the lead director said, his voice quiet. "You let this woman on a plane. You sat there. You said nothing. You didn't just embarrass the firm. You exposed us to ridicule, and you lost the biggest deal of the century." Richard tried to speak. "She's fired. Obviously. I fired her myself last night." "So did we, Richard," the director cut him off. "And now, so are you. Your resignation is effective immediately. Clear out your desk by noon." The Zoom call ended. His company was sold for parts within 6 months, swallowed by a larger, faceless competitor. Richard Sterling, a man defined by his name, was now a ghost. He was last seen a year later, not at Augusta or Shinnecock Hills, but at a sun-scorched, second-tier public golf course outside of Ocala, Florida. He was alone, his $5,000 suit long gone, replaced by a sweat-stained polo. He missed an easy putt, and the man at the next tee, a regional car dealer, nudged his friend. "Hey, you see that guy? That's Richard Sterling. Used to be a big shot. Total train wreck." Richard heard them. He flinched but said nothing. He had, after all, learned his lesson about the dangers of speaking up. For Marcus Thorne, the incident was a data point, A critical one, but a data point nonetheless. The Thorn Dynamics IPO was delayed, not cancelled. 6 months later, Marcus sat in his sprawling, minimalist boardroom in San Jose, listening to the final pitch from the firm he'd chosen to replace Sterling Capital. It was a smaller, hungrier boutique firm, run by a woman named Sarah Jenkins, one of the other investors who had been on that same G800 flight. Sarah's presentation was the antithesis of Caroline's philosophy. It contained no buzzwords about prestige or anointing. It was all data, transparency, and a ruthless focus on long-term sustainable growth. "Mr. Thorn," she said, "we aren't going to sell your company's story. We're going to prove your company's value. The data does all the talking we need." Right on cue, the boardroom door opened. Chloe entered, poised and confident. She was no longer the nervous new attendant. She was now the director of in-flight services for the entire Thorn Dynamics fleet. She had personally designed the service protocol for the boardroom, and she placed a cup of coffee next to Marcus and one next to Sarah. "Thank you, Chloe," Sarah Jenkins said, looking her directly in the eye and smiling. "I appreciate that." Chloe smiled back. "Of course, Ms. Jenkins. Let me know if you need anything else." Marcus watched the simple, respectful exchange. He saw the genuine, unforced dignity. This was the test. This was the game. And Sarah Jenkins had just won it, without even knowing she was playing. "The deal is yours, Ms. Jenkins," Marcus said, as soon as Chloe had left the room. "Let's get to work." The IPO was one of the most successful of the decade. Thorn Dynamics stock soared, and Marcus's personal net worth tripled. He didn't use the windfall to buy an island. He used it to endow the Thorn Dynamics Foundation, a $10 billion fund dedicated to providing full-ride STEM scholarships for students from low-income backgrounds, students just like he had been. His new money was now in the business of creating a new generation of innovators, a direct, philosophical rebuke to the old money gatekeeping that Caroline Croft had championed. For Caroline Croft, the final receipt was delivered in agonizing daily installments. After being fired by Richard in the hotel lobby, she'd taken the red-eye back to Newark in a coach-class middle seat. When she landed, her corporate black card was declined at the Starbucks. Her fiancé, a hedge fund manager she'd been set to marry, had sent her a one-line text: "Don't call me, we're done." The Bloomberg article had made her radioactive. She wasn't just fired, she was a pariah, a walking, talking liability. No firm on Wall Street would touch her. She was the woman who had lost a $95 billion deal because she was mean to a steward. Her co-op board in her Tony Upper East Side building, the same kind of old money snobs she had tried to emulate, convened their own meeting. They voted to have her removed, citing a notoriety clause in her contract that deemed her a detriment to the building's reputation. She was forced to sell, and the final, crushing humiliation. She had to sell her Himalaya Birkin. The bag she'd claimed was worth more than a life. She took it to a high-end consignment dealer on Madison Avenue. The dealer, who had seen the Bloomberg article, looked at her with a sickening mixture of pity and disdain. "Ordinarily this piece is exceptional," the dealer said, sniffing. "But given the provenance, it's become rather infamous. No one wants the Caroline Croft bag. I can offer you $30,000. Cash." It was a tenth of its value. Caroline, broke and facing eviction, took the money. She watched the dealer take the bag, her entire identity, her status, her weapon, and toss it unceremoniously onto a pile of last season's cast-offs. A year passed. A woman named Kathy Peterson walked into the break room of a drab, linoleum-floored office park in Hartford, Connecticut. Kathy was Caroline. She had changed her last name, dyed her signature blonde hair a mousy brown, and traded her white pantsuits for ill-fitting, scratchy polyester slacks. This was her new life. She worked for a third-party data entry firm called Infolink Solutions. Her job, for 9 hours a day, was to manually transfer account numbers from scanned invoices into a new spreadsheet. It was mind-numbing, soul-crushing work. The break room smelled of burnt microwave popcorn and old sour coffee. She sat at a wobbly particle board table, unwrapping a cold, pre-made sandwich. She was no longer analyzing multi-billion-dollar acquisitions. She was, in the most literal sense, just help. At 2:00 p.m., an email popped up. Mandatory all hands. Meeting, 2:15 p.m. Conference room, Big news. Kathy shuffled into the conference room with the other drones. The room was windowless, with buzzing fluorescent lights. Her boss, a cheerful, oblivious man named Gary, stood next to a projector screen. "Okay, team, settle in," Gary said, beaming. "This is it, the big one. I've been working on this for 6 months, and we finally landed the whale. This contract is going to double our revenue and secure all of our jobs for the next 5 years." He clicked a button on his laptop. The projector flared to life. "As of today," Gary announced, his voice cracking with emotion, "Infolink Solutions is the official data migration partner for—" The logo filled the screen, the stylized, sharp, silver delta. Thorn Dynamics, Aerospace Division, Caroline, Kathy, stopped breathing. The air in the room felt thick and hot. She could hear the blood pounding in her ears. Gary was still talking. "Yes, it's huge. They're onboarding their new West Coast supply chain, and we are going to be handling all the data. Thousands and thousands of invoices. All hands on deck." The room erupted in polite, confused applause. Caroline just stared. At the logo, the name, Thorn. He was everywhere. She had run. She had changed her name. She had hidden herself in this suburban tomb, and he had still found her. But the true, sickening horror of the karma wasn't that he'd found her. It was the realization that he hadn't. She wasn't a rival. She wasn't a vanquished foe. She wasn't anything to him. She was a line item. A rounding error in a massive outsourcing contract, probably signed off by a mid-level procurement manager who got a bonus for saving 3 cents per line item. She was, once again, working for Marcus Thorn. Not as a VP, not as a partner, not even as a flight attendant. She was now, quite literally, a tiny, insignificant 22-an-hour cog in his vast, global machine. She stood up, her chair scraping loudly on the floor. Gary paused. "You okay, Kathy?" She didn't answer. She clapped a hand over her mouth and ran. She stumbled into the cheap, public women's bathroom. She fell to her knees in the handicapped stall and was violently, wretchedly ill. She retched until her stomach was empty, her throat burning, tears of pure, agonizing humiliation streaming down her face. She finished and sagged against the cheap, painted metal stall divider. She looked up. Her reflection stared back at her from the cheap, warped, soap-stained mirror. She saw the mousy hair, the dead, terrified eyes, the pale skin, the cheap blouse. She had truly, finally, found her place, and it was a place she had built for herself, one keystroke at a time. Far above her, at 45,000 feet, Marcus Thorn was in his G800 flying to London. He was reviewing a data report on his tablet. Chloe, now his chief of staff for executive operations, set a coffee on the ebony wood table beside him. "Thank you, Chloe," he said, not looking up from the screen. "Metrics on that new data entry contract look solid. Efficiency is up 1.2%. "Yes, sir," Chloe said. "Infolink Solutions. They're cheap, but they're accurate. Good, Marcus murmured, tapping the screen. That's all that matters, the data. He turned his gaze from the spreadsheet and looked out the window. He didn't see the ground. He didn't see the office parks or the people in them. He just saw the deep, brilliant blue of the stratosphere and the clean, perfect curve of the earth. He had work to do. And that is what we call receipts served. Caroline Croft built her entire world on the idea that some people were just help. She was so blinded by her own arrogance, racism, and classism that she couldn't see she was insulting the one man who held her entire future in his hands. She learned the hard way that character is the one thing you can't buy, and the person you step on today might be the one who owns the ground you're standing on tomorrow. What did you think of Marcus's response? Was it the perfect, cold karma, or would you have done something different? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you love stories about entitlement getting crushed and hard work winning the day, do me a favor and hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to see it, and make sure you subscribe and turn on all notifications so you never miss another story of sweet, sweet justice. Thanks for watching.